Well, happy Thanksgiving, guys. I'm still a little bit rattled that I said the wrong church. Man, I practice every morning to make sure, because it's been 8 years of saying one name and to say it differently. But happy Thanksgiving. It is a great season for us to reflect on the gratitude and generosity. And it's also a great opportunity for us to step into being grateful and generous with our neighbors, with one another, with our families. So welcome here. It is amazing to see this reaction to what we're thankful for, to see so many sticky notes, to see so many people writing what they're thankful for. We have a lot to be thankful for as we look around us in the world. I also want to welcome the youth and the kids. Welcome to our service. So great to have you here with us this morning. It is exciting to have a fuller room with you, part of it. So today we're continuing our conversation back to the scriptures. We're looking at the conversation of going back to the Bible. And last week, I suggested that the ultimate way God communicates his story is through Jesus Christ, through Jesus himself. And we looked at the Gospel of John, and John himself shows us that the preeminent, meaning like the greatest way for us to understand, is to look through Jesus himself, the ultimate Word of God, the Word that became flesh. So it is in Jesus and because of Jesus that we have life, that we can even understand the meaning of life, or that we can have life to the fullest, is only once we encounter and understand who Jesus is. Now, it's a complicated task, and there's no doubt a lot of wrestling around it, but that is our starting point. That is where we go with, is that we come to the scriptures, we come to the Bible with the living Word of God being Jesus. Now, what I want us to notice is that Pete Greig has this excellent quote that I want to share with you. Here it is on the screen from his book, How to Hear God, and he says this: what this means is that hearing God begins and ends with meeting Jesus. We understand the Bible in the light of Christ and not the other way around. Simply said, Jesus then is the central figure for us. He's the starting point, he's the middle point, and he's the ending point. He is the focal point of who and what we wrestle with when we engage with the Bible, when we go back to the Bible. And how we wrestle with the Bible reminds me of this family trip that my family took in 2015. We had really good friends here in Saskatoon, and he got a job to teach at Arizona State University, so they moved to Arizona. And we were kind of talking as a family, it'd be a great opportunity for us to take a summer to travel to Arizona, but not just go to see them in Phoenix there, but on the way do all these kind of different trips to like the Lewis Clark Canyon, do the mini hikes there, the Grand Canyon, Antelope Canyon, and then get to Phoenix, but on the way back see some more things. It was like a really big holiday. We were gonna see a lot of sights. And I've never been to that part of United States, so what I did what we all do, I think, right? Unless you have a GPS. I took out my phone, I punched in our route. Jessica, my wife, is really good. She loves planning this stuff out. She loves routing and mapping where we're gonna camp, where we're gonna stay in the hotel, where we're gonna do this or that. And so we had all the coordinates, and we punched it all in the Google phone, or in the phone on the Google Maps. Man, Google phone. Anyways, put it all in my car, and we started driving, and the map's been great. It takes us to Lewis Clark Canyons. We go explore those, go in them. It's unreal. We go through all the different sites. It's working well for us. Even though I don't know the area, the Google map is keeping us on track. We're hitting all the right things. It's telling us the right distances. We're not messing up. It's going great. And through the whole journey of a week of seeing all these things, we finally end up in Arizona. We visit our friends, and we're like, this is awesome. We're having a great time with them. The weather's always great in Phoenix. It was a good time, and now we're going to head back. And on the way back, we said to ourselves, we got to see the Mesa Verde. And what that is a sacred place of ancestral Pueblo people, and they built these thriving communities in the mesas, in the cliffs. So there's still to this day these ruins, these living spaces of these people. And it's like a national park, and you can get in there and check it out. And we saw the pictures, and we're like, we got to get to this place. So what do? I don't know how to get there, so we put it in the Google Maps again. It gives us the route. It looks like the right time. But I remember Jessica saying, because she's coordinated this whole trip, she looked, she researched, said, this looks a little bit different than the way we're supposed to go. It's like, well, it's in Google Maps. I don't know, I can try another. Nope, this seems to be the way. So we trust the maps. We buckle in, we go. And if you've been to the United States, you'll notice that the roads in the United States are really good. Like they're like just smooth. There's very few potholes, especially in that part of the world. So we're going on this great highway. Everything's going good. The map's telling us you're this far away, this far away, this far away. And we notice the road starts getting pretty bad. Like kind of Saskatchewan-style road. Like, if you work on the road, sorry. A few potholes, all of a sudden it's kind of becoming broken. And we pull up to this like section where it's like literally gravel road at this point, and it's kind of a Y. And the way the map is telling us to go is up this really high incline of this like grid road that looks shaky. At this point we have this little RAV4. It's a little SUV. My boys are little, so it's okay, but it's a pretty tight little car. It's not a four-wheel drive, it's an all-wheel drive, which there's a difference I find out. But so we pull up to this fork and we're like, this can't be the way. And the other way looks like a little village, and we thought it has to go through the village, and it kind of hits the main road and it will get to this national park. Well, we pull off to the village, and sure, nope, it's all surrounded by this cliffs. There's no way out. So as I'm pulling out back as the thing's remapping me, telling me to go up this incline, there's a guy there on a horse. And I'm like, perfect. How Americana is that? So I roll down my window and say, hey, we're going to this Mesa Verde. Is this the road to it? And he doesn't say much. He says something, but I don't understand what he says. He has a bit of an accent. So I ask again, and he kind of has this wry smile and like nods, yeah, this way, points at it. We're like, okay. So we buckle up and we start going on this incline. And at this point, I'm like, all my instincts are telling me the map is wrong, but now I've committed and I can't revert. Like, it's kind of a narrow road too, so like I can't reverse either. So we're like, all right, let's keep going. So we slowly go, and we get up to we crest it, we get to the top, and we do see like tire tracks. But it's not really a road, but the map keeps telling us to go. So we're like, okay, well, we'll just go slow, and we're going. It's like really bumpy, really not a great road. And when, all of a sudden we realize as the sand is blowing that we're driving on the side of the mountain. Like, it's not a road, it's like the cliff, well, it's not a cliff, we're not falling off, but it's a face of the mountain. There are tracks there. So, your heart's in your throat, you're driving slow, you're going through this place, the map's telling you to go this way. And sure enough, thank God, we make it. And we pull in, pull out, and then there's a ranger there. And so I start talking to him. I said, we're so glad to be here, but that was a really hard road. Because we see all these cars parked there. There's hundreds of cars. There's lots of people visiting. We're like, we didn't see any cars the way we came. It's a pretty hard road. And he's like, how did you come here? So I explained to him, and he has these jaw drops. And that's like a service rescue road that you're never supposed to take. And super dangerous. I think my mom's just finding out about it. I'm sharing it here from the stage. And then he points, and on the other side, there's this massive, beautiful, twinned highway that just our maps did not pick up. And so what happens to us is that we have the same terrain, but we receive a new perspective from this ranger. And I find wrestling with Scripture so much is like this. We often read stuff in the Bible, and we receive this terrain, we get this GPS, we get this map, but often till we get a different perspective, it's hard for us to understand or even locate ourselves in some of the stories, because some of the stories are really hard to understand. And until we have a perspective, it's hard to navigate that terrain. So today what I want us to do is look at one remarkable story in the Bible found in Luke chapter 24. You can dial into that now. It'll also be on the screen, where a couple of people are navigating and reinterpreting to make sense of their situation. They're on the way, they're on the road, and they're trying to interpret events that have occurred around them. So let's look at that. Now, that same day, two of them were going to a village called Emmaus, about 7 miles from Jerusalem. They were talking with each other about everything that had happened. As they talked and discussed these things with each other, Jesus himself came up and walked along with them. But they were kept from recognizing him. He asked them, "What are you discussing together as you walk along?" They stood still, so they stopped, their faces downcast. One of them, named Cleopas, asked, Are you the only one visiting Jerusalem who does not know the things that have happened there in these days?" I love this story. It's one of those stories that grips my heart about how we encounter and navigate our stories with Jesus. It's actually one of my favorite stories in the Bible. There's two people on this journey, they're having a conversation, and they encounter Jesus on the way. They encounter him on their way home. And on this ordinary journey that they're having, like this is like some of the things I want to pause and kind of dissect here a little bit. They're just going on an ordinary journey. And in that journey of wrestling and grieving and trying to understand what happened to Jesus, trying to understand their Bible, trying to understand their local news of the things that just occurred, they're full of questions, trying to make sense of life, trying to make sense of tragedy in life. It occurs to me that isn't that the way we often encounter tragedy? When tragedy or trauma or pain or disruption to our lives occurs, our natural reaction is actually to make sense of it, right? Like we try to make sense of our pain and understand, why did this happen? How could this happen? We say things like, well, this happened because I did this, if it's a personal situation. Or this happened because they did that. Or we say things like, maybe if I just did this thing, that wouldn't have happened. Had I only. We say things like that because we try to make sense of our pain. We try to make sense of our situations. And so it is for these two. Their story is located with a conversation on this dusty road. They're going somewhere. We know this because it's actually kind of interesting that Luke names Emmaus. It's not some famous road or destination, like a biblical writer, he could have said they're going to Jericho or Bethlehem. But no, it's this place that's hardly known. And like many of us on our ordinary journeys, right? Like whether it's going to pick up groceries, drop off kids at hockey or a dance, at all these kind of things, they begin this conversation about the local news that's grieving them. And the event is so clear, and it's so big, and it's so large, that they're trying to make sense of it. And they're shocked. They're shocked by his question. Because it's everywhere. It's on CBC, it's on CTV, it's on Global News, it's on Twitter, it's on Instagram, it's on Snapchat. Everybody's talking about it. So when Jesus asks them what's going on, they're in complete shock. They're like, how do you not know this? Where have you been? Are you living under a rock? What's going on? And Jesus replies, or asks the question, what things, he asked. About Jesus of Nazareth, they replied. He was a prophet, powerful in word, deed before God and before all people. And the chief priests and our rulers handed him over to be sentenced to death, and they crucified him. What thing, Jesus asks? Tell me more. What's going on? And they simply tell him the facts of the story. They simply say, well, here's what happened. And then they reveal their sadness and disappointment, not just in the horrible event, not in just what has happened. They reveal their disappointment in what they thought was going to happen for them through Jesus. But we had hoped that he was the one who was going to redeem Israel. And what is more, it is the third day since all this took place. We had hoped. We had an idea of what and how God would act. He was going to save us. We had a hope of what that would look like, both politically, sociologically, religiously. We had it all figured out. He was going to do these things for us. After all, we read the law and the prophets, we read the Old Testament. We knew what was going to happen. We had this imagined. We had a hope. I remember reading this and rereading this, and this part stopped me in my tracks when I read it carefully. You see, I too have a hope. If I'm honest, I have many hopes. I have grown up in the church. I have studied in theological institutions. I have studied theology. I have read diverse books on the subject of God. I have lived through stages of certainties and uncertainties of faith. I too have a hope. And like the disciples' hope, my hope is too rooted in space and time with sociological, psychological, political, and relational hopes. And I would venture each of us in this room have a hope. Maybe hope for relationships, hope for politics, maybe hope that the service doesn't go too long. We all have hopes. And these two on the Emmaus Road, their hope is not out of whack or crazy hope. They lived in a place and space where their people were subjugated by an empire. They were controlled, dominated, told what they can and can't do, how to live, how to worship, how to speak, how to pay their taxes. They were under a regime. And as the people of God, they had reason to believe that God would rescue them from this tyranny of oppression. After all, he's a God who rescues. Their hope was a good hope. They had the right to reign. And don't we have hopes when it comes to God and life? And don't we as well come to these hopes through understanding of what justice should look like? Through how we read the scriptures, through what we believe is right and wrong. Don't we carry hopes into our everyday moments of life? In addition, they continued, some of our women amazed us. They went to the tomb early in the morning but didn't find his body. They came and told us that they had seen a vision of angels who said he was alive. Then some of our companions went to the tomb and found it just as the women had said, but they did not see Jesus. Not only has Jesus not accomplished to redeem Israel as they thought he would, he's now gone. And there's angels and things are happening, and they don't know what to do with these events. They don't know what to do with this news. Jesus said to them, "How foolish you are, and how slow to believe all the prophets have spoken. Did not the Messiah have to suffer these things and then enter his glory?" And beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he explained to them what was said in all the scriptures concerning himself. He explained the Bible for them. I love how Eugene Peterson, in his paraphrase, puts it, "You're so thick-headed, so slow-hearted." What a great description, right? Thick-headed, slow-hearted. I love that description. You're following your GPS off a cliff. What are you doing? You're not listening to your basic instincts. But what I also love is in that moment, Jesus retells them a familiar story of God. He retells the law and the prophets, the Old Testament. He tells them the stories they know. But he adjusts their lens. He reorientates their imaginations about God through Jesus. He adjusts their GPS. He gives them a perspective of the terrain they find themselves in. Pete Greig, again, in his book, puts it this way. I missed one of the quotes, I guess. Well, there's the first quote before this quote, and it says this: "All our lives we've heard," and he imagines that these are the disciples listening to Jesus, and he puts it, "All our lives we've heard these stories of Abraham and Moses. But the way he tells them now ignites something indescribable in our hearts, insight after insight we've never heard before." And a few pages later, he says, "Hearing God begins with Jesus and leads us immediately to Scripture, which in turn points us back to Christ." In and through Jesus, the story changes our perspective, our lens, where our hearts are ignited for God and for people. What we are witnessing in this small exchange, in this small Emmaus story, the reason the story is so significant and so beautiful when we come back to scriptures is that in this story, there's an exchange, this dynamic picture of what is the Bible, and it is being explained and explored as a dynamic dance between God's written word in the Bible and his final word in Jesus. As they approached the village to which they were going, Jesus continued on as if he were going to go further. But they urged him strongly, "Stay with us, for it's nearly evening, the day is almost over." So he went in to stay with them. I love this, that Luke includes this, that Jesus was pretending to go on. He wasn't actually going to go on, but he pretends to do it. I don't know why that detail's in there, but I love that it's included. And they're like, no, you got to stay with us. Which brings me to my favorite part of this whole story. It's my favorite part of this story. When he, that's Jesus, was at the table with them, he took bread, gave thanks, broke it, and began to give it to them. Then their eyes were opened, and they recognized him, and he disappeared from their sight. They asked each other, "Were not our hearts burning within us while he talked with us on the road and opened the Bible to us?" I love that part of the story. The Emmaus Road story is inescapably an account of God speaking through our everyday life and community, through creation, through space and time, through the Bible, and through culture. And Jesus joins in and speaks in through our relationships as we encounter and wrestle the Bible. It begins with this leisurely conversation on this dusty road about current affairs, And you can easily picture, the Saskatchewan Grid Road and walking on it, talking about some really important local news that have happened, and you're unpacking them and trying to make sense of them in light of God, in light of faith, in light of where you're at. And it's this ordinary walk to the village that nobody really knows. In this very ordinary moment of life is exactly when Jesus joins. And I want us to notice something, that Jesus, the way he comes to these disciples, the way he joins these, he's really unremarkable. So much so they don't actually recognize him for who he is. They're prevented, it says, from recognizing him, but he's unremarkable. And he's not weird in his language. He's not speaking King James or Shakespearean. That's not an attack on King James, but he's speaking their everyday language. And they completely don't recognize him, even though they are talking about him. Jesus joins in our everyday, present, messy conversations, whether we notice it or not. In our conversations about God and life, he begins to make sense of them through himself. He begins to orientate. He begins to give us a new perspective of our terrain. New perspective of our terrain. This is powerful, friends. You see, wrestling and engaging with scriptures is kind of like this. It is becoming immersed in the story of God on the way, in our ordinary moments, in our ordinary life, driving somewhere through all the traffic and having conversations. Engaging with scriptures happens on the way in our everyday life. And significantly for me, that in the act of hospitality, in the act of opening a door to our neighbors, in the act of hosting somebody, in the act of breaking bread with somebody, in the act of having a meal together, is when Jesus reveals himself in our midst. Our GPS, our directions are adjusted, location is made clear through Jesus and by Jesus. Our terrain is put in better perspective when we not only go back to the Bible and wrestle with it, but when we open doors of conversations with others, when we host people, when we create opportunities of hospitality. The Emmaus Road is a reminder for me that N.T. Wright, as a theologian, calls Jesus here the covert Christ. That is not recognizable Jesus at times is drawing to us covertly, though in the ordinary moments of life, significantly through the acts of hospitality, Jesus is inviting us to embark upon a slow journey of deep, deep discovery that will change our lives. Did we not burn inside when we heard him speak? Did life not make more sense when we began to see it through Jesus? When the Word that became flesh became real in the person of Jesus, did we not come to those hard things of life and receive support, care, and love? Friends, Jesus reminds us that in him and through him, our imagination is shaped and the Bible is then put in its fullest context possible. Better said, perhaps, Jesus needs to shape our imagination and the Bible to make sense of life. After all, Jesus is the living Word who gives perspective to our terrains, through whom God's story becomes our story, and God's imagination becomes our imagination.